I am JD and welcome to TWOgether. This is our third episode of our special on work from home. In the first episode, we looked at the impact of all of us working from home and what that means for the internet, and especially how we can all contribute to make this a bit smoother for all of us. In the second episode, we shared practical tips for working from at home, and I really hope that you find those tips useful. In this, the third episode, we will have a look at cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is always important, but it becomes even more important when you work from home. It might sound complicated, but we're going to do our best to make it as understandable as possible. It isn't that difficult. It's just about a couple of things that you should take care of and a couple of things you should make sure that you don't do them. Let's get started. You might wonder why it is suddenly so important to take care of cybersecurity when you're working from at home. You might even wonder if it isn't the same as working from an office. And the answer to that is very clearly no. And there are two reasons for that. Reason number one is when you're working from an office, especially in a bit bigger company, there's a lot of technology and a lot of expertise involved in protecting the IT infrastructure, protecting the devices, protecting the data, basically protecting the company against cyber criminals. When you're working from at home, you don't have all that technology, you don't have the teams behind that, you don't have the expertise available, so you are the person who has to take care of it. And the second reason is cyber criminals are very aware that we, at this moment, are all working from at home, and they do everything they can to abuse that. By trying to hack our systems, by trying to get access to our data, by trying to get access to the company through us. There's a lot going on. Researchers see that cyber criminal activities have exploded and they will continue to explode. So no, it's not the same as when you're working from at home. And yes, it is very important that you understand what you need to do, and it's also important that you understand what you should not do. So let's get started. The place to start improving your cybersecurity is your Wi-Fi router. Your Wi-Fi router has three very important tasks. First of all, it creates the internet connection. So it's the bridge between whatever device you have and the internet. Secondly, it of course creates the Wi-Fi to which you can connect with all your wireless devices. And the third thing is it has some safety features built in. It's important that you start managing those. Have you never done that? Have you never logged into your Wi-Fi router to do that? That is a very clear signal that it's crucial that you start doing that now. There are too many types of Wi-Fi routers, so it's impossible for us to explain you how that should be done with your particular type of Wi-Fi router. But don't panic. Have a look at your Wi-Fi router, look for the brand and the model, and search that brand and model on the internet. Find the user manual, and there you can find exactly how you can connect to the web interface of your Wi-Fi router. Once you are connected to the Wi-Fi router, that's where you can make all the settings. As soon as you have connected and figured out how to do that, you need to do three things, which are very important. The first step is to make sure that you have the most updated firmware installed on your Wi-Fi router. Those updated firmwares take care of a lot of security issues. In your web interface, you will be able to find that option where you can check for the recent version. If it is installed, you can even install it, and in most cases you can also make a backup from the settings first. It's advisable to do that. Better safe than sorry. As soon as you have installed the new version of the firmware, in most cases you have to restart the Wi-Fi router. Once that is done, you can connect again, you can check again, and then you know for sure that you do have the last version of the firmware installed. Very important step. The next thing you should do is just as important. You have to make sure that you change the standard default password to access to the device. Please understand that it's not the same password that you're using to connect to the Wi-Fi. Most Wi-Fi routers come with a standard setting for the username and the password by which you can connect to the device. Anybody who has that can access your device and can make changes. So it's important that you create a unique password which is not the standard one, just to make sure that nobody except for yourself can connect to that device and can make those changes. As soon as you have made sure that you have the current version of the firmware and you have changed this standard password, the next thing you should do is have a look at which devices are connected to your Wi-Fi router. That is important for two reasons. Number one is you will get an overview of the devices that you actually have, which you will need a little later. And secondly, you might find some devices you don't know. That could be friends or family that have visited you in the past and have given access to, or it could be that you already have some connections which you don't want. In case you find devices which do not belong to you, which are still active, it's the right moment to change the name of the Wi-Fi and to change the password of the Wi-Fi. Great, first step done. You have taken care of your Wi-Fi router, which is a very important step because this is the first and in most cases also the last line of defense between the internet and your devices. The next step is to start taking care of those devices. You're going to have to do the same thing as you did with the Wi-Fi router, but it's a little bit more complicated. You need to start with making sure that the operating systems of all your devices, and that includes your computers, your phones, your tablets, are updated. It depends on which operating system you have, it depends on which device you have. I cannot show you in detail every step, but most devices and most operating systems offer this updating feature. Make sure that all available updates are installed, because those updates, just like with your Wi-Fi router, solve security issues. They solve vulnerabilities, and you need to make sure that you have them installed now, but you also need to make sure that they will be installed in the future. There are two ways of handling that. Number one is you could of course activate automatic updating when that's available. And you can of course say, well, for example, once a week I will check all the devices and do the updating myself. It could of course be that you find out that there are no longer updates available for your device or for the operating system. That is a good moment to consider to stop using them, because when vulnerabilities are discovered and there are no longer updates available, those devices become a risk, and cyber criminals love to use those risks and those vulnerabilities. So no more updates should mean don't use them anymore. As soon as you've taken care of the devices and the operating system and made sure that every update available is installed, you need to start looking at the apps. Make sure that all the necessary updates are installed, but also review if you are still really using those apps. Apps you no longer use, consider to delete them for two reasons. Number one is it makes your system basically leaner. There is less installed on it. So future updates will go faster and you will have more memory available. And secondly, those apps you are not using are unintended. So you don't know if there are issues. You don't know if there are security issues with it. You don't know if they're accessing any kind of data you don't want them to access. So keep your devices as lean as possible. Remove the apps you are not using. And make sure that all the available updates are installed. Now, as soon as you have installed them and you have reviewed them and you are sure that all the apps you use are at the latest edition and all the security patches are installed, have a look at the settings. Go to privacy settings, go to security settings, and try to understand what happens. Try to understand which app has access to which services. If you see something suspicious, change that setting or even delete the app. Now, many people ask, why is that important when I work from home? Let me explain. What in most cases will happen is that you bring your private devices plus your work device in the same network. If one of those devices is not properly protected, they could become a risk for the other devices. If one of your apps is not properly protected, they could become a risk for the device where that is on. And if that device becomes a risk, it can become a risk for the other devices. So make sure that all the devices with which you share your work devices are properly updated, properly set up, and don't form a risk for each other. Wow, we made some good progress. You started by taking care of the Wi-Fi router, then you took care of all the devices, the operating system and the apps. Now it's time to start making backups. Backups are your safety net. You need a backup in case something happens to the devices, and it doesn't even have to be something by a cybercriminal. It could be that your device just stops working. It could be that your device gets damaged. It could be that your device gets lost or stolen. The data on that device will no longer be available. When you have a backup, you can restore all the data from that backup. And believe me, when something happens to the device and the data on that device is lost, you will want to have that backup. And you don't want to have a backup which is 2 years old. You want to have a backup which is basically made after the last thing that you did. There's several ways of creating a backup. One way is to use a cloud solution. And you can actually use a cloud solution in a way that all your data is automatically stored on the cloud, so you don't even have to make a lot of effort with the backup, because most of your data is there. The downside, of course, is that most cloud solutions will start costing you money when you're consuming more data than the so-called free packages. Cloud solutions also have a negative side when it comes to security when things are not set up properly. When somebody hacks your account, they will have access to the backup. So you might consider a couple of security steps, like setting up multi-factor authentication, regularly changing your password, keeping an eye on the access to that cloud account, and encrypting the data on it. You could of course also opt for a USB disk. Fast, cheap, but there are also some risks connected to that. The disk could get damaged, the disk could get lost, and somebody could get access to the disk and read your confidential data, or your personal data, or your private data. When you use a USB disk, make sure it is encrypted and make sure that it's stored in a proper place. Don't keep it connected, don't keep it on the same table, don't even keep it in the same room. Separate it so that in case you need it, you can access it. If you ask me what I'm using both. I'm using cloud solutions and I'm using USB disk. The USB disk has a benefit that I can use it even when I do not have an internet connection. The cloud solution has the benefit that it's constantly backing up my data and I can access it from anywhere and everywhere at all time when I do have an internet connection. Find what works for you. It's just my advice to look at both options. When you've done the things we have advised you so far, take care of your Wi-Fi router, take care of your devices, create a backup and make sure that you make regular backups, you've made a really good start. This is a very good foundation for cybersecurity. Now, let's have a closer look at some of the things you should not do while you work from home. One of the things, and this is very important, do not start sharing work information and work files through your private accounts, even if that would be more convenient, especially when you're working from at home. And there's several reasons for that. One of the reasons is you probably don't know 100% sure how secure those private accounts are. You do not want to have the responsibility that confidential information ends up in hands where they don't belong because somebody had access to the private account. It's not just your private account, it's also the account of the person you're sending the data to. Secondly, when you share information through channels which do not belong to the company, it becomes uncontrolled information. And then risks are there. Version management, you don't know, because you don't know where those documents and files then get stored. Confidential information, well, you don't know as well, because you don't know where that information ends up and you don't know where it gets stored. So the best advice is don't use your private accounts for work. Another thing you shouldn't do is try to outsmart the system, try to find shortcuts, or try to get access to something you cannot access at the moment because you're working from at home. It's much better to just request that that gets solved. And another important thing that you shouldn't do, but that applies always and not just to work from home, is do not use the same username and password for multiple accounts. Make sure that you have passwords and usernames which are unique, or at least a unique combination for each account. And separate work from private accounts. That is also very important. Look at multi-factor authentication. When available, activate it, because it adds another layer of security, or at least one additional layer of security to just the username and password. And when a service, especially when you use it privately, when a service does not provide multi-factor authentication, think about not using it, because just the username and just the password is taking a certain risk. And there's one more thing that you should understand, which is very important. Cybercriminals do everything they can to abuse this situation through social engineering, through phishing, whatever they can. They try to collect information, they try to put those pieces of information together with the purpose to make you believe that whatever it is they write you, tell you, or send you is correct and safe. Do not assume safety, and ask yourself why a lot. Why is that person asking me this? Why is that person contacting me? Why does somebody ask me to do something which is not part of my job? Why would I suddenly get an email from a person I never contacted with, etc., etc., etc. Just ask yourself why, and ask yourself, does this make sense? Half of cybercrime is the result of people not thinking enough about what is happening. This was the third and final episode of TWOgether Work From Home Special. We focused on cybersecurity. We gave you some practical things. When you watch this, I think you got a couple of things to do. And I really hope that we help you to have a more secure work from home experience. I'm looking forward to your feedback. I hope you will subscribe, and I hope to see you soon on the next episode of TWOgether.